my presentation now goes a bit away from the climate and climate change issue. It's about anti-Semitism, anti-Vaxx ideology, and ideas of nature and the natural order. I still keep like the link to the far right and to far right ideology though. Specifically, in my work, I analyzed the ideological links between a rejection of modern medicine, particularly vaccination, and anti-Semitism, and the references to nature in anti-Semitic, anti-Vaxx worldviews. So the subject to my study, which is my PhD project, is the German-speaking anti-vaccination movement from the 19th century through the Nazi era until today, through which I examine what the Jew represents in this folkish idea of nature in the anti-vax movement. So what I do is an analysis of current and historical anti-vax narratives and also visualizations, as you can already see some pictures here. And yeah, I lay my focus on anti-Semitic conspiracy fantasies of folkish or far-right thought patterns that contrast this natural order with the rejection of the artificial or of Jewish phenomena in explicit anti-Semitic turn. I want to start to look a few years back, like to get you all on board with this kind of niche topic when the pandemic unleashed quite a lot of anti-Semitic narratives. We probably all remember anti-Semitic narratives that kind of unhinged a new kind of anti-Semitism during the COVID pandemic and the pandemic-related protests. We had those each Saturday in Austria, in Vienna. So there were a lot of pictures to take and a lot of anti-Semitism to be shown on the streets. For example, we have repeatedly the Nazi crime comparisons and relativization of Nazi crimes, like here in this picture that's talking about a Nazi corona dictatorship that is compared to historical National Socialism. We had self-victimization like yellow stars with here the inscription of unvaccinated, referring to the National Socialist symbol of the Judenstern, the yellow star. And we had a lot of Shoah distortions. So, for example, the obligation to wear masks was compared to the Nazi persecution of Jews. And in the middle here, very striking, during the whole protest, there were a lot of anti-Semitic, anti-vaccination narratives. Like here, the slogan, "Vaccination sets you free," combined with the image of the entrance gate of the Auschwitz concentration camp. This kind of anti-Semitic expressions not only fulfills a function of like a seemingly legitimized way of expressing anti-Semitic ideas then, but it also builds on an, I think, outstanding past of anti-Semitic answers to modern medicine and vaccination. So I was then, during the pandemic, actually a bit irritated by the surprise of the public that anti-Semitism can be combined with anti-vax attitudes, and took a look into the history of anti-vaccination, but also the ideology behind it. So the history actually reaches back to the 19th century, where, and it is like anti-vaccination movements are as old as the vaccination itself. And in the 19th century, the opposition to vaccination from its very beginning as a movement and from actually various political opponents has been characterized by a reactionary and by anti-modern attitudes, on also a kind of fear of interfering with people's natural way of life. So the collective glorification of a natural order was already a central reference for the folkish or German nationalist far-right rejection of modern achievements in general. This reactionary modernism, as it was called by the historian Jeffrey Herve, is based not only on the idea of a natural order, but also in connection to this on modern anti-Semitism and folkish nationalism as an ideology, which is an ideology of inequality, which divides people into natural and unchangeable collectives, and that means like an ethnic, racist collective, which is what actually folkish means, like in this specific German context. This worldview opposes individuality, freedom, self-determination, and actually achievements of enlightenment and emancipation in general. So this natural collective is conceived as an organic, natural, in the sense of faithful community. And the idea and support of a natural order is central to this folkish worldview, on the other hand, on several levels, because the ideology functions in terms of these supposedly natural communities. Now, what role does anti-Semitism play in this folkish belief in the natural order? And also, how are these references connected to anti-Semitism? How are they mobilized in these anti-Semitic worldviews? And how do views revive then in anti-vaccination narratives? To answer these questions, I think we have to look at the historic constellations of the folkish anti-vax movement. And yeah, well, this folkish mystification or also glorification of the natural, as I have just described, and the reactionary belief in nature and a natural order, or as Karin Stögner put it, nature as ideology, is historically and ideologically linked to reactionary attitudes, and in them the projective rejection of phenomena associated with modernity, as it is an anti-modern ideology, and this modernity, this rejection of modernity, then seen as artificial, or in like the anti-Semitic conclusion, as Jewish. So in the folkish belief in nature, nature is imagined as good, healthy, authentic, while artificiality is associated with modernity and projected onto the Jew. This opposition is in general very central to the worldview, to the far right and folkish worldview. So there's the folkish Aryan on the one hand, the natural ideal on the one hand, and the Jew on the other hand as the artificial evil of the world. I think this picture shows it quite well, as it is a propaganda picture. It doesn't seem to hide any of the ideas. So this also means that anti-Semitism isn't a counterpart in this belief of a natural order, but it is a central element of this worldview. And I have several examples now that will try to prove my point in, over the time until today. Here in this picture, I think you can really see the rejection of the artificial, specifically unwanted parts of science and medicine. And here it becomes very explicitly anti-Semitic, of course, as it is a Nazi propaganda picture. This rejection of the artificial healing or cure and medicine in general, here marked as Jewish, which is also portrayed as some poison or contaminating medicine. For me, it was due to this historical and ideological connection not very surprising that the opposition to vaccination was not only spread in the 19th century by folkish movement, but also by central figures of National Socialist regime, like Rudolf Hess, Heinrich Himmler, so very top rank National Socialists in Germany. And yeah, I have here this example of a German propaganda newspaper titling "Down with the Jewish Doctors." So you really can see the connection to an anti-medicine and anti-Jewish stance combined in this, also propaganda picture that shows the Jew hunting the German and trying to give him his Jewish medicine and killing him by that. On the other hand, we see a quote from Julius Streicher, another well-known National Socialist opponent of vaccinations. He was the editor of the well-known anti-Semitic magazine Der Stürmer, and he called the vaccination a racial disgrace. Rassenschande is the German word here. So even though there is I think, really striking connection from National Socialism also to this anti-vaccination and anti-medicine stance, I have to add that vaccination were not generally rejected in the Nazi time, nor was criticism of modern medicine a state doctrine. But still, I think this ideological connection is very important, and in the next example you can also see kind of the ambivalence that Nazi politics had with nature on the one hand and modern medicine and vaccination on the other hand. So the belief in the power of nature and reactionary modernism was a central ideological reference, but it also included these ambivalent politics, like the actual real politics about vaccine and medicine in general. So here we see in color a visual representation of the belief in nature as like a fateful power of nature, the right of the strongest, and the idea of the survival of the fittest, like a social Darwinist idea. We see this idea of health through toughening up. So the father here is toughening up his son with the cold water on fresh air, and like the whole Aryan blonde family in the background, being outside, going to nature and healing through nature. And in black and white, on the other hand, we see the reality of the politics in National Socialist regime against infections, also during a time of war, of course, where that did include vaccinations, even if for rather pragmatic reasons than ideologically argued. And I think like this color versus black and white actually shows quite well what like the actual situation between ideology and pragmatism was in the NS regime. In another poster, we see a suggestion to prevent illness. This is also from Nazi time, so it is not clearly dated. It's in the 1930s. We see a suggestion to prevent illness through nature, the seemingly like right and healthy way to care for the German nation's body, like the Volkskörper, is here presented as to prevent tuberculosis, which was a quite common and actually quite fatal disease at that time, that tuberculosis could be prevented through the body's natural defenses. So here this is a poster from the public health departments. They actually suggest hiking in the fresh air and sunshine to strengthen the body. They suggest outdoor play and sports to build up the body's resistance. So you can really see here that like a infection like tuberculosis that cannot be prevented by going to the fresh air, but it is presented even by the public health departments in this way. So movement, sunlight, toughening up were seen as the natural medicine, and in opposition or even in resistance to an modern medicine seen as an artificial medicine, which this strong Aryan Volkskörper, the nationals, like the ethnic racist idea of a national body, does not need, because it is connected to nature. It fights against diseases through toughening up, through hardening, through refinement, a process that was intended to be natural and that was very compatible with the racial ideology of the Nazis. This idea also includes a belief that there is a natural destiny, a natural order, meaning the survival of the fittest, and like a natural selection as a means of strengthening the healthy national body. And this idea also includes that this national body does not need medicine anyway. The myth that Jews had invented the artificial medicine and artificial vaccinations to poison the Germans. So the idea of an artificial prolongation of life through modern medicine or vaccination was ideologically fundamentally rejected. We see this same idea of medicine as Jewish marked poison in this newspaper that was actually quite a bit earlier in the 1920s from Switzerland, so not connected to the NS regime. And I think what is really striking here is, apart from this representation of an Aryan, honestly fighting persons, and then like a natural ideal of a man rejecting this poisonous medicine, is this animal metaphor of the snake, which can in general serve as an anti-Semitic marker, because this snake metaphor has attributions such as being poisonous, creeping, being false, deceitful, and therefore recalling anti-Semitic attributions at the time and also today, because this animal metaphor actually works quite well to find its way into updated and modernized representations of the same topic. So here we see a screenshot from an Austrian neo-Nazi group that also uses this snake metaphor and repeats the general idea that medicine is portrayed as poisonous and disease-causing system, and in this case also a profit-oriented and potentially well described as Jewish through this metaphor of the snake. It says here, just to translate, the evolution of medicine, we do not have a healthcare system, but rather a profit-oriented sickness system. The snake metaphor also found its way into this far-right magazine, Austrian far-right magazine, that titled The False Game of the World Health Organization, where they changed the snake, like the logo of the World Health Organization, to this poisonous snake with red bloody eyes, and therefore very implicitly used this snake metaphor as an anti-Semitic motive. So from the cover picture of the magazine from the 1920s to today's example, I just tried to use here now a short illustration how there is historical continuity in this analogy of the metaphor of the snake, covering anti-Semitic stereotypes to be poisonous, sneaking secretly, or being dishonest, and this works very well with the motive of vaccination or anti-vaccination and anti-modern medicine. So yeah, as we can see here, the logo with where the snake especially is changed. Even more implicitly anti-Semitic is this next share picture, also from a far-right, did I put the source? Yes. A far-right neo-Nazi Telegram channel where this blonde German Aryan person rejects the vaccination handed over by this person in a pinstripe suit, telling him that vaccination is meant to set him free, but the Aryan is rejecting it with the words, "No thanks, I'm staying in resistance." So we also can see that this motive of the anti-vaccination being part of keeping the healthy Aryan body authentic and connected to nature is still working with these anti-vaccination motives. So this is quite recent, I think from a few months back, this picture. It's obviously older, but I saw it online a few months back. And my last examples are these two screenshots that show the interconnection between a belief in nature and a blood and soil ideology with this rejection of the artificial, implicitly anti-Semitic rejection of medicine through Völkisch nationalism. So on the left, we have this picture of showing nature as the real medicine, saying this is an antidepressant, the German forest, and on the other side, seeing pills, medical pills, titled at "That is crap." And on the other hand, we see like the ideal of a nationalist lifestyle, where you also see that there's like sports or like being active in your body, the ideal of a family included, but vaccination is excluded. So as we have seen, the opposition to vaccination argued in this way was shared in the very past from Völkisch actors to National Socialists, and today we have like a references to this in the far right, which became quite popular during the COVID pandemic, but are still references that are made in, for example, these online communities. So it's a similar idea, even if in a quite different wording, and of course on another level of explicitly but connected to anti-Semitism that can still be found today, and that were especially found during the COVID pandemic. If I may remind you to the beginning of my presentation, so I also brought some statistics for people who like numbers, where we can see here, and I didn't put a source on this one, this is from the anti-Semitism monitor from the Jewish community in Austria from 2021, where we can see two big rises in anti-Semitic incidents that was like from March to May 2021, and then again in November. And in March to May, it was the first time that the vaccination against COVID was publicly discussed, and it became a direct rise in the incidence of anti-Semitism. And in November, there was again a discussion about vaccination combined with a lockdown, and that made again a big rise in anti-Semitic incidents in Austria. So, not least, I think this increase proved that the opposition to vaccination and the ideological belief in a natural order can provide ground for anti-Semitic narratives, even though this, of course, does not mean that every opponent or every critic stands to vaccination, or every fear of pandemic and a new developed vaccination must be anti-Semitic. Rather, I think anti-Semitic structures and narratives have been, and I can prove that, have been historically central to anti-vaccination ideology and a belief in nature and the natural order. Whether this is expressed quite explicitly historically or rather implicitly nowadays. And of course, regardless of how it is meant, the anti-Semitism poses a real threat to Jews, as we saw, for example, in 2021 in this graph of anti-Semitic incidents. So I think I'm gonna skip my conclusion due to time reasons, which is just a small summary of what I just said, and I'm gonna have 8 minutes of question, I think that's fine, and say thank you for your attention.